When this game finished, chat went into absolute meltdown on Chess-Base India, who were covering this game live. But do not assume the result. This one can go one of three ways. Such tense drama from round 7 of the Qatar Masters. Magnus Carlsen was playing with white. His opponent was Murali Karthikeyan, a GM over 2600 from India. Where else, right? At this Qatar Masters tournament. This one is a cracker. And just before we dive in, don't forget, check out the link below to chessbook.com if you haven't already. It's the #1 place to learn and build your opening repertoire. And it won't just show you the moves, but also the themes of the opening, so you can learn the strategy and ideas. And then you can go away, play online, come back, and it'll instantly tell you where you went wrong in your online games, because it integrates with Lichess and chess.com. Check that one out. Thank me later. It's really awesome. So back to this game, we get e4 from Magnus, now e5 from Murali, and knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Roy Lopez from Magnus, main line. But after a6, bishop a4, knight f6, Magnus starts dabbling. So he doesn't go for the mainline castles or other popular moves. He goes for knight c3. Really quite a sideline. I mean, walk around a junior chess hall, you see this all over the boards. But at the top level, they like to build some kind of big centre, not necessarily put the knight there. Okay, b5 played by black. Now, the one time Magnus did essay this opening before against Vishy Anand, b5 was not played, bishop c5 was played, and Magnus chopped here. So after bishop b3, we get into a new game relatively quickly. Bishop c5, and now Magnus plays a bonkers looking move. He needs to get on chessbook.com, learn some opening repertoire, right? So what he plays here is knight d5, not d3 or castles. Now this looks madness because you're giving up the e4 pawn. Actually, maybe he has done his opening homework, because if black takes this, now you can go d4. Now I'm just going to show you the main line because it's complicated. The bishop should capture, knight takes, and queen g4. Hits the knight, hits the pawn, and you can't even save this knight because the queen taking here is too much of a threat. So you have to castle, drop the knight, and then apparently black can win this knight back, you know, in this manner, because if the knight moves somewhere, you go here, you pick up the queen. So this is the main line I found with the engine. I mean, just some madness. So this is why black shouldn't take on e4. Obvious, right? Anyway, so that wasn't played. We get d6 played. Pawn c3, Magnus looking to build the big centre now, and actually the opening's going well because bishop e6, he can now get a good game with castles if he want, but he plays d4, a very double-edged move. Does still leave him with some advantage, but only if he steps right, because captures, pawn recaptures, and after bishop takes, pawn takes, doubling these pawns, black flicks in a check and Magnus loses his castling rights. Now, why doesn't he play the obvious bishop d2? Well, actually, when black swaps these bishops, it really helps because the knight can drop back and simply that d5 pawn is going to fall soon. Black will then have a great game. Now, bear that in mind, because after Magnus goes king f1 for that very reason, and the knight drops back to e7, well, he should now play bishop g5. And there's one other game that reached this position, high level game anyway, 2 grandmasters, and this move was played. And you stop either of these knights capturing the pawn because there's a pin down here to the queen, the bishop would take and you wouldn't be able to recapture. And no time to chase away or you shatter the pawns. So the computer says knight fg8 is the best move, preparing h6 stuff, but okay, now white's gained some initiative and you can start developing pieces. But what Magnus does here is queen d3. Where's he heading with this? You can see the evaluation bar on the left reacting. Black is now better because queen d7 played, anticipating this stuff with a pin, and now Magnus goes pawn h4. Just some wild opening play. We get h6, h5, and now the pawn drops. Black is a pawn up, got the better pawn structure as well, because this one is isolated and blockaded by the knights, and got the better king position. Look at this one, can't castle. This one's prepared to castle in just a moment. So the opening try has backfired on Magnus here. However, this is Magnus Carlsen. This game's not over. So rook h4 is played. Another weird move, but it does activate the rook, right? It wasn't coming this way anytime soon, so it looks at this square. We get castles queenside, and now a3 kicks back this bishop, and then pawn a4. What's that all about? Spending 2 goes to do it. Well, obviously you moved this bishop here, so now it's on the file, you know, you're x-raying it with the rook. So it drops back to b6. Now we see knight d2. By the way, if you take, you can do this, you can open the a file, but the check gets you nowhere. King b7, you either trade rooks or retreat, not the best. So knight d2. Logical remaneuvering. That knight was going nowhere. Now we see rook he8. Good move from Murali. Centralizing. Look at the clock times. He's down. Magnus playing on time here. We see takes on b5. Pawn recaptures. The knight comes to e4. And now king b7. Nice calm move. And queen f3. X-raying that king's diagonal. Now black here had the option to go pawn c6. This is the top engine move because you support this knight, you get rid of the x-ray on the king, but the queen still holds this pawn. What black does is queen c6, and it allows Magnus an opportunity to liquidate, but he's way up on the clock, gets ambitious. Now he could just take here, and after knight recaptures, you know, forced, you can't double the pawns, there's a threat to take here with the bishop, queen supporting. So knight takes, you can take off the queens, king recaptures, and bishop takes. You restore the material balance. This is a sample line. Materials level, you've got a weak pawn, but you've got the bishop pair, you're on an open file, you know, roughly level. But Magnus doesn't go for this. He plays the crazy looking move of bishop takes on h6. What is this all about? You can see the computer hates it. Now, if that one's captured, well, fine, you're doing okay, because you can take the knight recaptures, this one takes that knight then, and white's doing well here. What's the material count? Yeah, materials level, but obviously there's lots of pressure here and here, everything like that. However, you're not obliged to take this bishop straight away. Black can take this knight, which is played, and now you're threatening to win a rook, so rook recaptures is forced, and now you take the bishop. And what's the big difference? Well, in this transaction, you've now won 2 minor pieces for the rook, and of course that's usually better, especially when they've got lots of outposts, pawns on the board, which we can see they do here. So Magnus's judgment letting him down. He drops back with this rook, opens up the queen's x-ray once again, and now king b8 is a very important move. Murali seeing all of Magnus's tricks. Why was that move so important? Well, if something else had been played, like pawn b5 for example, then rook ac1 comes, and the queen actually can't stay in contact with the knight, and it would be dropping off the board. Even in that line of b5, if the queen went to b5 here, there's bishop c4 and that kind of thing, and you just can't hold on to the knight. So this was important. Now if rook ac1, queen b7 is available. So rook e2 was played by Magnus. Now why does he play this move? I have no idea. This is one of those like weird, mysterious rook moves, right? If you've ever played a mysterious rook move, it means you're on your way to being a grandmaster or possibly stockfish. So keep your eye on mysterious rook moves. Don't know why Magnus does it. Maybe looking to double or just waste time, playing on the clock. Now queen b7 played. Here Magnus struggling for moves, struggling for plans. You know, he's tied down. These knights are dominating. So he takes one of them off. The knight recaptures, and he does win a pawn in the process. Now, why doesn't black take here? Well, after rook d1, you're giving a lot of counterplay, an unprotected piece, another one x-rayed behind. If you go c5, this pawn starts getting weak and everything. So instead, we get c6. Now I make what I just said look stupid because the pawn's weak. But okay, this is a great move because you're offering the queen exchange. And if queen f5, trying to keep queens on the board, now the pawn does drop. It is okay to take it. You know, this is a nice clump. Gonna support this bishop on an outpost one way or another. So Magnus, he takes off the queen. It's the lesser of two evils. King recaptures and rook d1. Ugly, ugly move. You don't want your cannons stuck behind pawns defending them. You want them on open files. You want them pushing past pawns. So here we get king c7. Rook e6 now played, but this is brilliant defense. 56 seconds on the clock. Still 9 moves till time control. But rook f8 played. No passive defense here. Brilliant move, and you cannot capture. Can you see the problem with rook takes on h6? What would be the trick for black here to then win the game, you know, on the spot? So well done if you saw the tactic of rook takes on h6, knight e3 check. The pawn is pinned by this rook. This rook would no longer be controlling e3. Then you win the rook on d1. So rook d2 played because of that threat. Now rook f6. You're just in time to defend this pawn. The knight supports it. Magnus drops back. He wants to keep some tricks alive. We get king d7, g3, rook f5 targets that pawn. So now g4, but you're making holes in the position. Rook f7 now played. Now we get rook d3, knight c7, it's spinning into here to target this pawn. Magnus just waiting with the rooks, knight e6 and d5 played. Tricky move, the pawn was about to drop, so Magnus is now saying, if you take my rook with bishop, I'm going to flick in the intermezzo of takes with check, then recapture your bishop. So black takes here, best move. Now, well, I say best move, the evaluation bar reacted. Knight g5 was also possible and a good one, but this one really good. Now we get rook f3, and this is classy from black. Not swapping rooks, which is okay, but actually going rook g7, not rushing the position, realizing the power of the combination of these pieces. The pawn attacked. What do? You know, if you try and defend it, then d4 comes and black saves that pawn. So Magnus takes here. This one drops off the board. Now we get rook f6 invading, but bishop d4, great move. Hits the rook, hits the pawn. Magnus takes, but now rook f4. I mean, these are impressive skills. The time is now back on the clock for both players. Black plenty of time to think about it. So Magnus takes on b5. This one drops with check. King e1, knight c5, and now after the knight's coming to d3, Magnus sidesteps again, and bishop e3, forced resignation from the world number one. This rook is attacked, so what if you check? Very natural move. Well then king c6 hits this one, and you actually have to give it up for the knight, and then you're just completely lost. Because if you go say rook a5, well the problem is knight d3. That king is completely boxed in now, as we can see. All you have to do is land a check, which you can do from d2. White can't stop it, just has to start giving up rooks here. So this, the final position. Magnus goes down again after dabbling in the opening. He's pushing the boat out hard. Fair play, it's fun to watch, but boy, he will not be happy. I hope you enjoyed this game. Do smash subscribe, really helps me out. And see another epic game of chess, check out the video on screen. Thanks very much for watching and see you soon.